Is America on the verge of World War III with Iran? I'm Robin Kinderman, and you're watching JBS Straight Talk. By now, you've likely heard the news about the attack on our U.S. Embassy complex in Iraq and of our response by killing a top Iranian general. General Qassem Soleimani, who was in charge of Iran's Special Elite Quds Forces and the country's foreign terrorist operations, was killed by a U.S. drone airstrike to his car near the Baghdad International Airport. While most have been quick to blame Trump for precipitating World War III, what was this Iranian general doing in Iraq to begin with? The U.S. insists he was plotting to immediately kill Americans and that he was responsible for the attack on our embassy. However, the drone strike to assassinate this high-ranking official of the Iranian government was not authorized by nor consulted with Congress. Over the weekend, U.S. Senator Rand Paul said the following on Twitter: "If we are to go to war with Iran, the Constitution dictates that we declare war. A war without congressional declaration is a recipe for feckless, intermittent eruptions of violence with no clear mission for our soldiers. Our young men and women in the armed services deserve better." The last time the U.S. Senate passed a formal declaration of war was in 1941, during World War II. Yet most of the same Democrats in the Senate who are now condemning President Trump for their airstrikes also voted to pass the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act, in 2019 that funds our overseas military operations, including those in Iraq. While an attack on a U.S. embassy is certainly regarded as an attack on sovereign U.S. soil, one possible alternative to help reduce future attacks that isn't being discussed is the idea of closing our embassies located in hostile areas like Iraq. This isn't a new idea. For example, Congressman Ron Paul proposed closing down our embassies in volatile areas after the bombing of our U.S. Embassy in Beirut, Lebanon. Here's what he said in a C-SPAN recording from the House of Representatives on April 20th, 1983.
Mr. Speaker, following the bombing of our embassy in Lebanon, there have been statements concerning the need to tighten security at all U.S. embassies in order to protect U.S. diplomatic personnel. No one has suggested an obvious alternative for protecting our foreign service personnel stationed abroad. We should withdraw our diplomatic personnel from volatile areas of the world. In suggesting such a withdrawal, I'm not suggesting the breaking of diplomatic relations with these foreign governments. If the closing of our embassies is impossible, we should at least be taking steps to greatly reduce the scope of their functions. In this era of rapid transportation and instantaneous communications, the role of our embassies and of the ambassadors serving abroad has drastically changed. In previous eras, when communications and travel were slow and cumbersome, the U.S. ambassador made binding policy decisions without consultation with Washington. Nowadays, the decision-making process is centralized in Washington. Ambassadors and embassy personnel merely carry out policy decisions that are made at Foggy Bottom. Modern technology has reduced the need for the large embassies. We must also end the practice of stationing intelligence agents in our embassies. This practice helped to precipitate the hostage crisis in Iran and possibly even in Lebanon. These intelligence agents serve no diplomatic function whatsoever.
With the advent of high-speed internet and smartphones, Ron Paul's statements about instantaneous communication are even truer today. Large embassies are unnecessary and cost a fortune to maintain and defend. The U.S. Embassy in Baghdad is the largest in the world. At 104 acres large, it's approximately the same size as the Vatican, or 80 football fields. And it's also the most expensive in the world, too. It cost a staggering $750 million to build, with an annual operating cost of well over $1.2 billion in taxpayer money. If there is anything to be learned from these attacks, it's that sanctions and overseas interventionism don't work. It's like trying to put out a fire by drenching it with kerosene. Contact your representatives and senators to remind them that any overseas military action against Iran requires an official declaration of war. Rather than escalating the conflict, urge them to withdraw our troops and diplomatic staff from harm's way and any undeclared wars. Until next week, take care and God bless.